You know, I can always appreciate the beginning of most roller coasters. You go up that initial chain lift, your heart rate accelerating faster than the train going over that first drop. Although over the last 10 years, we have noticed launch coasters are becoming a lot more prominent than their previous predecessor. I mean, it's one thing to go up a chain lift. As you slowly rise off the ground, your adrenaline is slowly building as you crest over the edge. But something entirely different when you're sitting on a launch platform, your heart's just pounding before you launch to whatever speed in only a few seconds. Manufacturers are really putting a lot of their attention in launches. Intamin Vekoma, they're letting their creativity flourish. Lately, every time we see one of these manufacturers install a new launch coaster at a park, it's something that's completely revolutionary we've never seen before. As long as we keep seeing companies breaking the boundaries of what we typically know about a launch coaster, we're always going to be excited for what's to come. So I want to make a top 10 list on the top 10 rare and unique launch coasters. Although for this list, I'm not going to be specifically just focusing on the launches these coasters have, just because there's only so many ways you can utilize a launch and what kind of launch system you can have. According to the roller coaster database, there's over 17 different types of launches, but most of them are just different variations of common launch systems we already know about. For example, we already understand hydraulics, LSMs, LAMs, but when you look at the variants of these designs, you get LAM Launch, LAM Boost, LAM Launch Multipass, LSM Boost, LSM Boost Multipass. You get the idea. There are just a lot of different variations of almost each type of launch. So for my top 10 list, I do have a few criteria. First of all, I want to see how different a launch may be compared to its counterparts. Like, let's say a roller coaster has an LSM launch. Great, but I want to see if it does something different than roller coasters that have the exact same element. Second of all, let's say a roller coaster, it does just have a basic launch. Let's say it just had a regular LIM. However, let's also say the roller coaster may have great elements, a fun setting, that may be incorporated into the launch, which makes it more of a one-of-a-kind experience. I would use that to justify it being on the list. Now, before I get to number 10, I do have one honorable mention I wanted to put on the list, but I really couldn't. Now, the coaster I'm referring to is at a place in Taiwan called Pattaya Park Funnyland. The attraction goes by the name Formula 1, and it's actually the first ever coaster to use an air-compressed launch system. Well, not exactly. We all know SNS Worldwide for developing the air-compressed launch technology. However, long before Hypersonic XLC and Powder Keg, Formula 1 was built, not by SNS. We don't actually know what company developed Formula 1. That information was kind of lost in translation. It is highly suspected the park built it themselves, considering all their other attractions and their one other roller coaster was built by Pattaya Park. So they are the prime candidate for building what looks like an Intamin reverse freefall ripoff. Like, seriously, this ride is just Tower of Terror 2, but with an air-compressed launch. Now, why I cannot include this coaster on the list is because it was built in 1999. However, for 14 years, the coaster was sitting there, standing but not operating, until 2013, when the track was completely removed and they only left the 196-foot tall tower. During all this time, the ride never opened to the public, and it never had a test run, as far as we know. Again, a lot of information about this coaster is very sketchy. Maybe the ride could have been operational, but it never opened, so I can't put it on the top 10. Finally, starting off of number 10 is Volcano the Blast Coaster at King's Dominion. Now, how could I not include Volcano? This coaster is themed exceptionally well. Known for its iconic structure that was meant to resemble a mountain that originally housed a bunch of other rides until Paramount's King's Dominion decided to remove all of them and instead have one roller coaster that winds in and out of the entire thing. First, the ride starts with the launch going to 70 miles per hour, takes a long left-hand swooping turn until the second LIM launch, blasting through the volcano, going out the top, going into an inversion that was actually the only one of its kind. No other roller coaster besides Volcano featured a rollout, then traversing a few laps around the volcano into a few heartline rolls until returning back to the station. For 20 years, Volcano has been an icon for King's Dominion, a fan favorite for the park, and I was so disappointed I never got the chance to ride it. I went to King's Dominion the following year in 2019, where 1 year prior, Volcano had its last year of operation. Volcano is truly unique. It is an Intamin original, the only Intamin catapult coaster, along with being one of the few Intamin inverted coasters, because, let's be honest, there aren't a lot of them. Since Volcano is gone, King's Dominion has some pretty big shoes to fill with that massive dirt pile by I-305, and the fact they don't even have a good launch coaster anymore. Number 9 is Capital Bullet Train, located at Motiongate Park in Dubai. Now, when I made this list, I wanted to include one for Mack Rides. They have really integrated themselves with their launch coasters, and I wanted to commend them on that. So looking through all their launch roller coasters, and yes, including the Blue Fire clones, and I gotta say, there are way too many of those installed. Why did I decide to pick Capital Bullet Coaster, aka Hunger Games Coaster? Well, it's because this one's a lot more different from the rest of them. Now, the ride is probably the smallest launch coaster Mack Rides has ever made. I mean, it's only 1,800 feet long, the elements are as basic as you can get, and the launch is not that fast. Now, why did I decide to include this one? It's due to the fact that this and one other Mack Rides coaster has an LSM multipass. So what happens for this ride, it goes onto the launch platform, it moves forward slightly, goes up the vertical loop, then falls backwards into the launch again, going up a vertical spike, going forward one more time to complete the vertical loop, then just continue on through the rest of the layout. Now, why this kind of launch is so special is because it's basically the new generation of launch coasters. A prime example of a company taking on this style of ride would be Intamin. They've been doing this over and over again. And Mack Rides, they've only done this twice. Hopefully we're gonna see a lot more from them in the future with this kind of model. And what do you know, we are. Dreamworld Australia, they're building a variation of a Blue Fire clone that's featuring this kind of LSM launch multipass. So hey, maybe in a few more years, we're gonna see something a lot more grand than just a Blue Fire variant. Number 8, Atlantis Adventure at Lotte World, South Korea. Lotte World by far is the premier theme park of South Korea. And for a park like this, they gotta have a flagship attraction. Atlantis Adventure is the park's only launch coaster, and until 2021, it is the country's only launch coaster. At least until the unknown coaster at Lotte's Magicforce is supposed to open. Now getting back to Atlantis Adventure, the ride features 2 launches. One goes into somewhat of a top hat, the second is the first ever LSM lift hill. And if you don't know, only 3 other coasters feature an LSM lift hill. One that most of you will probably know of is Maverick at Cedar Point. Now that is not the only thing that makes the ride special. Besides only going 46 miles per hour, 72 feet high, the entire coaster goes in and out the Atlantis building, also featuring a lot of dips and plunges that winds across the water to try and make the ride a lot more surreal. I'm not really sure how story-driven the coaster is. Either way, the coaster stands out and makes a great excuse to go to Lotte World. Number 7, Speed the Ride, located at the Nascar Café in Las Vegas. Now, when I think of Vegas, I don't think roller coasters. I think gambling, stratosphere, and high roller. The roller coasters, though, I don't particularly enjoy them, per se. I mean, it's a little annoying when El Loco and Canyon Blaster are the best roller coasters in all of Nevada. However, long before those rides, the Nascar Café had Speed the Ride, a premier multi-launch roller coaster. How the ride began, it hit the first LAM boost 0 to 45 miles per hour in 2 seconds, traversing through a tunnel of vertical loop, hitting a second LAM boost to 70 miles an hour, and to mimic Mr. Freeze, going up a 224-foot tall vertical spike until it would go backwards and do the entire thing in reverse. This was the only redeeming ride in Vegas. Until 2011, the thing was torn down. Now the entire thing's in a storage lot that you can only view if you peek over a fence, and you can see what was once the best coaster in Vegas for over 11 years. Now there's not much of a need to go to Vegas for roller coasters, unless you like the Big Apple. Number 6, Dododampa Fuji-Q Highland. Now what can I say about Dododampa that hasn't already been explained? This coaster continues to hold the record for fastest acceleration on any roller coaster, and the numbers are impressive. 118 miles an hour in 1.56 seconds. No other roller coaster comes close to breaking Dododampa. The only attraction that compares is Flug Vanafgrad at Hansa Park. That ride goes 62 miles an hour in 1.4 seconds. Doesn't seem to match up with the towering speed of 118. In 2001, S&S only sold 2 thrust air models. The first one, obviously well known as a flop, Hypersonic XLC at King's Dominion, when that coaster was just a prototype that was bought off the testing grounds of S&S Worldwide, Fuji-Q decided to scale up the entire concept. Even after 19 years, no ride has come close to Dododampa. In fact, this ride has gone even more powerful. The launch has been increased from when it first opened. The ride had a renovation in 2017 when they removed the top hat to put a record high loop, still establishing the ride as a top 2 in the park, and fits well in the amazing top 4 that Fuji-Q has to offer. Number 5, Lightning Rod at Dollywood. Lightning Rod is one of those coasters you just hear about constantly. It is praised and loved for its layout, and especially the beginning. This was Rocky Mountain Construction's first and only attempt at using an LSM launch on one of their coasters, and they put it on their wooden model. This was RMC's most recent topper track roller coaster, and Dollywood made sure this ride would be everything and more. The fastest wooden coaster in the world at 73 miles an hour has a quick acceleration towards the top of the apex before taking a dip rising up into a 165-foot drop before traversing through a bunch of sideways airtime and of course, the quad down. Airtime heaven to finish off the ride. Obviously, the only wooden coaster in the world to have a launch did come with a lot of complications during its debut in 2016, and downtime with this ride just became expected. Only launch wooden coaster in the world. Hopefully one day there'll be another, but based on Lightning Rod's reliability, I wouldn't count on the near future. Number 4, Shock at Magicland, located in Italy. Most of us know Mao rides for their Skyloop models. One could be like X Coaster at Magic Springs in Arkansas. Another well-known model they have is their X Car. Now, surprisingly, Mao rides have been around since 1876. And in all their experience, they've only made 3 launch coasters. Now, I picked Shock because the other ones are a lot smaller. One is like Formula X, located in the Netherlands. How the ride experience of Shock is, it goes on an LSM launch from 0 to 59 miles an hour in 2.5 seconds, hits a 114-foot airtime hill, maneuvers through a non-inverting loop, then a corkscrew later in the ride. What's great about the coaster, it seems like no matter where you sit, you're always going to experience the same forces, because the train is only one car of 6 seats, so it doesn't really matter where you're placed. Number 3, F.L.Y at Phantasialand. Finally, now that it's 2020, the long-anticipated flying coaster has opened to the public. We all know Phantasialand, they take theming their roller coasters pretty serious. Just look at Terran. Klukheim is so elaborate. Terran is beautifully blended between the land, and the ride has nothing but rave reviews. As to be expected, Rookburg and F.L.Y are the exact same story. We all know what a typical B&M flyer looks like, and then we know how this compares to it. The way Vekoma made the train able to invert riders into the flying position is executed perfectly. Focusing on how F.L.Y is, since Phantasialand they have a height limit so they can't build past a certain point, they decide to have 2 launches on the ride in order to help the ride reach its intended speed. How the launches are? Well, just looking at the POV, the first launch and the second LSM boost, they look okay. I mean, for the only launch flying coaster, it's probably not going to be too intense, although keeping in mind with what the rest of the ride does, it more than makes up for it. Number 2, Fury at Bobbejaanland. Sorry if I'm butchering that name. Now, what is so interesting about Fury is the entire premise of it. This ride is the only coaster that you can vote on how the ride experience is like. On the restraints, there are 2 buttons. One is forward, one is backwards. Everyone on the train votes. Whichever one has the majority, that is what the ride is like. Before the coaster even launches, it goes on a turntable that places the train in the position of forwards or backwards. This premise is so cool that you just can't ride Fury once, you gotta get both experiences. Number 1, Adventure Dive at Suzuka Circuit. Now, this ride is in no way big, it's a family coaster, but the coaster is just so strange. It features 2 launches, and also features tire drives, a chain lift, so it has all 3 ways to keep the train in motion. Just looking at the launches, the concept is pretty cool. The idea is you scream as loud as you can, and the higher the volume, the faster you go. Now, I'm not really sure how this works. According to RCDB, it says there are 2 launch cables where the power of the launch is set by how loud the riders scream, so yeah, just as vague as you expect on how the ride actually functions. Screaming most likely does nothing, but you know, it's a fun way to market the ride to families, get everyone pumped and excited, and I don't see any other coaster that does this, so I gotta hand it to the park for creativity on this one. Well, I hope you enjoyed my top 10 list on the most rare and unique launch coasters. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to my channel, and as always, thank you for watching.